The front door of the mansion flew open with such force that the glass panel shuddered in its frame. Mrs. Whitman's hand was a claw around Anita's upper arm, her manicured nails digging through the thin cotton of the maid's uniform. Anita stumbled forward. A small suitcase. Not even hers, just something Mrs. Whitman had thrown some of her things into, sailed past her head and burst open on the ground. A toothbrush, a folded photograph of her mother, and a worn Bible scattered across the stones. "You don't get to pack." Mrs. Whitman's voice was a whip crack in the quiet California morning. "You don't get dignity. You get out." Anita scrambled on her hands and knees, the gravel biting into her palms. She reached for her mother's photograph, clutching it to her chest as she looked up at the woman who had once called her the best help I've ever had. Mrs. Whitman stood in the doorway, her silk robe billowing, her face a mask of righteous fury. Behind her, in the shadows of the foyer, Anita could see the other staff gathered. Gardeners, the chef, the other maids. They were being made to watch. This was a lesson. "Please," Anita whispered, her voice cracking. "Mrs. Whitman, I only gave him the code because he said." "I don't care what he said." Mrs. Whitman descended the steps, her slippers crunching on the gravel as she bent over the cowering girl. "He is a guard. You were my trusted housekeeper. You had the codes to my home, to my art, to my life. And you gave them away like candy because a man smiled at you?" She laughed. "Do you know what they took from me last night? My grandmother's diamonds. A painting my husband bought me before he died. Irreplaceable things. And you? You're just a stupid, careless girl who thought she could do a favor and it wouldn't cost anything." Anita's tears dripped onto the photograph in her hands. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Please just let me explain to the police again. Michael is lying. He asked me for the code. He said 20 minutes. He said, the police have their report." Mrs. Whitman cut her off, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. "And I have my word. And my word in this city is law. You will never clean a decent house again. You will never step foot in this neighborhood again. I will make sure every agency, every family, every security firm knows your name and what you did. You are blacklisted, Anita. You are done." She turned to the staff gathered in the doorway. "Let this be a lesson to all of you. Trust is not given. It is earned. And when it is broken," she gestured to Anita, a queen dismissing a peasant, "there is no mercy." The door slammed. The sound echoed across the lawn. Anita stayed on her knees in the gravel, surrounded by her scattered belongings, the photograph of her mother now soaked with tears and dust. She was 22 years old, and her life as she knew it was over. That moment didn't fade. For 10 years, it played in the back of Anita's mind. Every time she interviewed for a job and saw the flicker of recognition in the employer's eyes, every time she was told, "We've decided to go another direction," every time she walked out of yet another agency office with her head hung low, Mrs. Whitman had been true to her word. The blacklist was comprehensive and brutal. Anita's 20s became a gauntlet of survival, a series of jobs so low and so invisible that no one bothered to check references. She cleaned diners at 3 in the morning, the mop water sloshing against her worn-out sneakers. She scrubbed motel bathrooms where the stains told stories she didn't want to read. She worked overnight shifts at laundromats, the rhythmic thumping of the machines her only lullaby. She took whatever she could get, cash under the table, no questions asked. The exhaustion was deep. The loneliness was a constant ache. She dated, but it never lasted. There was David, who had kind eyes and gentle hands, but who left after 6 months because she flinched every time he came home unexpectedly. "You treat me like an intruder in my own house," he'd said, his voice more sad than angry. "I can't live like this." There was Marcus, who had tried to understand until one night she checked the locks on the apartment door 7 times and he realized the depth of the trauma she carried. "You're not present with me," he'd told her as he packed. "You're always somewhere else, reliving something. I don't know how to reach you." She watched them go, each departure a small confirmation of what Mrs. Whitman had planted in her. That she was fundamentally untrustworthy, that her carelessness had consequences, that she deserved to be alone. But even in the darkness, Anita was building something. She couldn't control the world, but she could control a room. She couldn't trust people, but she could trust her own hands, her own systems. In the rare quiet moments between shifts, she sketched out a business plan on the back of a napkin. Adebayo Elite Cleaning, a company built on the precision of trauma, on the obsessive attention to detail that came from a decade of being terrified of making a single mistake. She hired women like her, women with hard stories, women who needed second chances, women who understood what it meant to be invisible. And slowly, painstakingly, she built a reputation. Not through charm or connections, but through results. Her team cleaned like surgeons. They left nothing unchecked, nothing unpolished. Clients started to notice. Contracts got bigger. The agency grew. By 32, Anita Adebayo was no longer the girl on her knees in the gravel. She was the owner of a small but respected company, financially stable, and for the first time in a decade, she could look in the mirror without flinching. The scars were still there. The hypervigilance, the double-checking, the inability to fully relax. Those were permanent fixtures like old injuries that ached when it rained. But she was standing. And that, she told herself, was enough. The email arrived on a Tuesday morning. Subject line: International Contract Inquiry, Hansung Industries, Seoul. Anita read it 3 times before she believed it. Hansung Industries was a global conglomerate, a titan of manufacturing and logistics. They wanted her company, her small, hard-won company, to handle the executive floor deep clean at their Seoul headquarters before a major corporate audit. The fee was more than she made in 3 months. The prestige was invaluable. Her team gathered around her in their tiny office, their faces lit with excitement and disbelief. "Seoul?" whispered Fatima, her longest-serving employee, a Somali woman who had fled war and understood the weight of a new beginning. "Anita, this is it. This is the door opening." Anita nodded, a cautious smile breaking through her usual reserve. "Book the flights," she said, her voice steady despite the fluttering in her chest. "We're going to South Korea." The flight was a blur of anticipation and preparation. Anita reviewed the contract details obsessively, memorizing the floor plans, the cleaning specifications, the security protocols. Old habits. When the plane broke through the clouds and the glittering expanse of Seoul appeared below, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. A small, tentative flicker of hope. The Hansung Industries headquarters was a 60-story monument of glass and steel, piercing the sky like a declaration of power. Anita and her team entered through the service bay, where they were issued temporary security badges and given a stern briefing by a facilities manager who spoke in clipped, efficient sentences. The executive floor was on the 55th level. As the elevator ascended, Anita smoothed her uniform, checked her equipment bag twice, and took a deep breath. This was just another job, she told herself. Just another floor to clean. The elevator doors opened onto a world of silent luxury. Dark wood paneling, minimalist art installations, the hushed atmosphere of immense money and power. Her team dispersed to their assigned sections. Anita, as always, took the most sensitive area herself. The CEO's corner office and the adjacent executive boardroom. It was in the boardroom, as she was inspecting the glass walls for smudges, that she first saw him. Through the transparent partition, she had a perfect view of the corner office. And inside, 2 men were locked in a silent, ferocious argument. Kim Jae-young was tall and broad-shouldered, his presence a calm, grounded weight in the sleek space. He stood behind his desk, his hands resting flat on the dark wood, his face a carefully controlled mask of composure. But Anita could see the tension in his jaw, the way his fingers pressed just slightly too hard against the desk's surface. He was a man holding back a flood. Across from him, his younger brother Kim Moo-shin was a study in predatory elegance. He was leaner, sharper, his suit tailored to within an inch of its life. He didn't stand still. He paced, gestured, his mouth moving rapidly as he jabbed a finger toward Jae-young. Then he threw a document onto the desk, the pages sliding across the polished surface like an accusation. The rivalry was instantly, unmistakably clear. This was not a corporate disagreement. This was a blood feud, Anita couldn't hear their words through the soundproof glass, but she didn't need to. The body language was a universal language of conflict. Mu Xin was the aggressor, all sharp movements and theatrical disdain. Jae Young was the wall, absorbing the assault, refusing to break. Twice, Mu Xin laughed. A cold, cruel laugh that Anita could almost feel. Once, he leaned in close and said something that made Jae Young's knuckles go white. Then Mu Xin straightened, adjusted his cufflinks, and walked out of the office with the swagger of a man who believed he was winning. Jae Young stood alone for a long moment. His shoulders dropped, just slightly before he caught himself. He turned to the window, his back to the boardroom, and for a fleeting second, Anita saw the exhaustion beneath the armor. She knew that posture. She had lived it. She averted her eyes and returned to her work, a strange and uncomfortable feeling settling in her chest. It was recognition. Over the next 2 days, Jae Young began to notice her. Not in the way a powerful man usually notices a cleaning woman, with dismissal or disinterest, but with a quiet, analytical attention that made Anita's skin prickle with self-consciousness. She felt his eyes on her as she moved through the executive floor, double-checking the locks on the supply closets, re-wiping surfaces that were already spotless, apologizing reflexively when her vacuum cord bumped a chair leg. "I'm sorry," she murmured to a trash can she accidentally nudged with her foot. Jae Young, passing by with a tablet in hand, paused. His brow furrowed slightly. He didn't say anything, but Anita felt the heat of that brief observation. It happened again the next evening. Her team had finished their shift and gone back to the hotel, but Anita had stayed behind, as she always did, to do a final walkthrough. She found herself in the executive boardroom, repolishing a conference table that already gleamed like a mirror. It was irrational, she knew. The table didn't need polishing, but the ritual calmed her. It was a small act of control in a world that had once spun violently out of her grasp. "You're still here." The voice was low, calm, and unexpected. Anita spun around, the polishing cloth clutched to her chest. Jae Young stood in the doorway, his suit jacket off, his sleeves rolled up to his elbows. He looked tired, human. "I'm so sorry," she said automatically, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. "I was just finishing up. I didn't mean to overstay. The contract says we have until midnight. I can leave now if—" He raised a hand, a gentle gesture that stopped her mid-sentence. "You're not in trouble. I was just curious." He stepped into the room, his eyes moving from her face to the table she had been polishing. "This table was cleaned 4 hours ago. I watched your team do it, yet here you are doing it again. Why?" Anita's throat tightened. How could she explain it? How could she tell a billionaire CEO that she polished tables because a decade ago a woman threw her out of a house and convinced her that a single mistake could destroy everything? "I just like to be sure," she said quietly. Jae Young tilted his head slightly. "In my experience, people only double-check things when someone once made them feel catastrophic for a single mistake." The words hit her like a physical blow. She stared at him, her eyes suddenly burning with the threat of tears she refused to shed. No one had ever said that to her before. No one had ever seen her. "I'm sorry," she whispered again, not knowing what else to say. "Stop apologizing," he said, his voice not unkind. "You're not in my way. You're not a nuisance. Whatever you're carrying, you don't have to apologize for it here." He turned to leave, then paused at the door. "What's your name?" "Anita. Anita Adebayo." He nodded once. "Good night, Anita Adebayo." And then he was gone, leaving her alone in the gleaming boardroom with a heart that was suddenly beating far too fast. The days that followed were a slow, careful dance. Jae Young didn't seek her out directly, but he made himself visible. He would work late in his office with the blinds open, a silent invitation for her to see him as he had seen her. Sometimes he would step out and offer her a cup of tea from the executive pantry, a small gesture that felt monumental in the sterile hierarchy of the corporate world. They began to talk. Short exchanges at first, comments about the weather, the city, the demands of their respective jobs. But gradually, the conversations deepened. Jae Young asked her about her agency, about how she built it, and she found herself telling him parts of the story she had never shared with anyone. Not the details of the fall, not yet, but the struggle. The years of invisible labor. The women she hired and why. He listened with an intensity that unnerved her. He didn't interrupt. He didn't look at his phone. He just absorbed her words as if they mattered. In turn, he shared his own burdens. The father who pitted his sons against each other. A chairman who believed that competition was the crucible of greatness. He calls us his two arrows, Jae-young said one night, his voice tinged with bitterness. One will fly straight, one will break. He's waiting to see which is which. Mu-shin, he explained, was the favored arrow. Younger, more aggressive, willing to do whatever it took to win. He had been systematically undermining Jae-young for years, poaching his key staff, leaking damaging information to the press, presenting himself as the future of Hansung, while painting his older brother as stagnant and risk-averse. He fights dirty, Jae-young said, and our father rewards it. He thinks ruthlessness is strength. Integrity is seen as weakness. Anita listened, her heart aching with a strange, protective instinct. You're not weak, she said quietly. I've watched you. You absorb everything he throws at you and you don't throw it back. That's not weakness. That's control. Jae-young looked at her then, a long, searching look that made her feel seen in a way that was almost uncomfortable. You understand that, he said. The control, the holding back. You live it. She nodded, not trusting her voice. Something was shifting between them, something neither of them named but both of them felt. It was in the way he lingered by her cleaning cart. It was in the way she found herself looking forward to his late-night tea offerings. It was in the charged silence that hung in the air when they were alone in that vast, empty office floor. If you're feeling the tension building, if you're rooting for Anita to finally find someone who sees her, hit that like button right now. And drop a comment below. What do you think Jae-young truly feels for her? I read every single one. Now back to the story. Then Mu-shin made his move. A leaked memo, carefully edited to make Jae-young look indecisive on a major merger, hit the Korean business press. The stock dipped. The board called an emergency meeting. Jae-young called Anita. It was late, nearly 11, and she was back at her hotel when her phone buzzed with an unknown number. She almost didn't answer it. Old habits. It's Jae-young, the voice said when she picked up. He sounded exhausted. I'm sorry to call so late. I needed to talk to someone who isn't trying to destroy me. She sat up in bed, her heart hammering. What happened? He told her. The leak, the board meeting, his father's cold, dismissive response. He looked at me like I was already a failure, Jae-young said. And Mu-shin was sitting there, smiling like he'd already won. Anita was quiet for a moment. Then she said something that surprised even herself. The leak. How did your brother get access to that memo? It was a confidential draft. Only my senior team had it. Then someone on your team is working for him, Anita said, her mind clicking into a familiar pattern of threat assessment. Your brother doesn't just get lucky. He's got a source. You need to find out who before he leaks something worse. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. You think like a strategist? Jae-young said finally, a note of wonder in his voice. I think like someone who learned the hard way that trust is a weapon, Anita replied. And if you're not careful, it will be used against you. That conversation was the turning point. From that night on, Anita became an unofficial advisor, a secret weapon in Jae-young's war against his brother. Her trauma-born hypervigilance, the obsessive attention to detail that had made her a laughingstock in her personal life, became a strategic asset. She taught Jae-young how to anticipate betrayal, how to build systems that made deception harder, how to spot the patterns in Mu-shin's attacks. Your brother relies on you being honorable, she told him one evening in his office. He knows you won't stoop to his level, so he operates in the space your integrity leaves open. You don't have to become him. You just have to close the gaps. Jae-young looked at her with something that was no longer just gratitude. It was deeper. It was the beginning of a trust that terrified her because she knew, with every fiber of her being, that trust could shatter. But she didn't pull away. She couldn't, and neither could he. The investigation into the mole on Jae Young's team moved quickly, guided by Anita's paranoid precision. She helped him design a trap, a series of 3 slightly different versions of a fake confidential memo, each given to a different suspect. When one of the versions appeared on Mu Shin's desk within 48 hours, the traitor was exposed. It was Jae Young's executive assistant, a man who had worked for the family for 5 years, bought by Mu Shin's promises of a promotion under the new regime. The confrontation was swift and brutal. Jae Young, with Anita's voice in his head telling him to document everything, recorded the assistant's confession and took it directly to his father. The chairman, faced with irrefutable evidence of Mu Shin's underhanded tactics, was forced to acknowledge what his pride had refused to see. "Your brother crossed a line," the old man said, his voice heavy with disappointment. "Corporate espionage against your own family. This cannot stand." Mu Shin was publicly reprimanded, stripped of his role in the merger negotiations, and exiled from the executive floor pending a strategic reassessment. It was a victory, but a partial one. The father's favoritism was a stubborn thing, and Mu Shin was already plotting his next move. "He'll come back harder," Jae Young said to Anita that night, the two of them sharing tea in his office as the city lights blinked below. "He always does." "Then we'll be ready," Anita said, and the word "we" hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. The counterstrike came not through a corporate leak, but through a personal excavation. Mu Shin, humiliated and cornered, decided to destroy his brother not through business, but through the woman his brother was falling for. He hired private investigators. He dug into Anita's past, and he found Mrs. Whitman. The gala was a lavish affair, a celebration of Hansung Industries' new international partnership. The ballroom was filled with Seoul's elite, politicians, celebrities, titans of industry. Anita was there not as a guest, but as the supervisor of the cleaning crew contracted for post-event breakdown. She wore her uniform, a discreet black polo with the Adebayo Elite Cleaning logo, and she moved through the glittering crowd like a shadow, invisible and efficient. Jae Young was on the stage mid-speech when Mu Shin made his move. The younger brother stepped to the microphone, a glass of champagne raised in a mock toast. His smile was dazzling and dangerous. "Before we continue this celebration," Mu Shin announced, his voice amplified across the ballroom, "I think it's important to honor not just our international partners, but everyone who makes Hansung great, including our service staff." The room murmured politely, unsure where this was going. Anita, standing at the back near the service entrance, felt a cold finger of dread trace down her spine. "In fact," Mu Shin continued, his eyes scanning the crowd until they found Anita, "I'd like to introduce a very special member of our cleaning team, Miss Anita Adebayo, from Nigeria, a woman with quite an interesting history." The spotlight, whether literal or just the weight of 300 pairs of eyes, turned to Anita. She froze, her hands gripping the cleaning cart beside her. Jae Young, still on stage, went rigid. His eyes darted to Mu Shin, then to Anita, his expression shifting from confusion to alarm. "Miss Adebayo came to us from Los Angeles," Mu Shin said, savoring every word, "where she worked for a prominent American family until a security breach she personally enabled resulted in a violent armed robbery. A robbery, I'm told, that caused irreplaceable losses. She was fired, blacklisted, and spent a decade scrubbing toilets because no reputable company would touch her." The crowd gasped. The whispers began, a rising tide of scandalized murmurs. Anita felt the world tilt. The cleaning cart was the only thing holding her upright. Her past, the past she had tried so desperately to bury, was being paraded in front of the most powerful people in South Korea. "But here's the truly fascinating part," Mu Shin said, his voice dripping with false concern. "This woman, this security risk, has been spending an awful lot of time alone with my dear brother. Late nights in his office, private conversations. One might wonder what kind of access she's been given. One might wonder if my brother's judgment has been compromised." He turned to Jae Young, his smile ablaze. "Brother, Were you aware that you've been confiding in a disgraced housekeeper with a criminal record for negligence? Or did she conveniently forget to mention that part? The silence in the ballroom was absolute. Every camera phone was up. Every face was turned toward Anita. She wanted to run. She wanted to disappear into the floor. Her chest was so tight she couldn't breathe. This was the nightmare. This was the fall happening all over again in front of the entire world. She looked at Jae-young, expecting to see the familiar expression. The shock, the betrayal, the cold realization that she was a liability. The look Mrs. Whitman had worn. The look every employer since had given her. But Jae-young's face was not a mask of betrayal. It was a mask of barely controlled rage. Not at her. At Mu-shin. He stepped forward, took the microphone from his brother's hand, and faced the crowd. His voice, when he spoke, was low and steady and carried the weight of absolute certainty. "My brother is correct about one thing," he said. "I have spent a great deal of time with Anita Adebayo, and I know exactly who she is." He looked at her across the sea of faces, his eyes holding hers like a lifeline. "I know that when she was 22 years old, exhausted and overworked, she made a mistake. She trusted a colleague who lied to her. And that mistake cost her 10 years of her life. 10 years of being punished for being young, for being tired, for being human." He turned back to the crowd, his voice rising. "What my brother didn't mention is that the colleague who actually committed the crime is still out there, unpunished, because a powerful woman named Mrs. Whitman decided to make an example of a black immigrant girl instead of pursuing the truth. What he also didn't mention," Jae-young continued, "is that this woman, this security risk, is the reason I discovered a mole on my own team. A mole my brother planted. Her so-called paranoia, her obsessive attention to detail, the very things my brother is mocking, are the reason my brother's corporate espionage was exposed." The crowd's murmurs shifted. The scandal was pivoting, the spotlight swinging from Anita to Mu-shin. Mu-shin's smile had frozen, his face draining of color. "So yes," Jae-young said, his arm now extending toward Anita. "I knew. I've known from the beginning. And I'll tell you all something else." He walked off the stage, through the parting crowd, until he stood directly in front of Anita. He took her hand. She was trembling so violently she thought she might shatter. "This woman," he said, loud enough for the entire ballroom to hear, "is the most trustworthy person I have ever met, because trust isn't about never making a mistake. It's about what you do after." She rebuilt herself from nothing. She hired women no one else would hire. She built a company on integrity. And tonight, my brother tried to destroy her to get to me. That is the man you would be choosing if you ever sided with him. He turned to face his father, who was sitting at a front table, his expression unreadable. "I'm done playing this game. You wanted to see which arrow would break. Well, here's your answer. I'm not going to become him to beat him. I'm going to stand here with her and let the board and the company decide what kind of leadership they want." The silence stretched. 1 second. 2. Then, slowly, the chairman rose from his seat. The old man walked toward his sons, his footsteps heavy on the marble floor. He stopped in front of Mu-shin, looking at him with an expression of profound, weary disappointment. "You brought a private investigator into our family," the chairman said, his voice quiet but carrying. "You dug through the past of an innocent woman. You tried to humiliate your brother in public. Not to win a business advantage, but to wound him. This is not strength. This is cruelty. And I have been a fool to confuse the two." He turned to Jae-young. "The merger is yours. The company is yours. Your brother will be reassigned to our overseas branch. Effective immediately." Mu-shin's composure shattered. "Father, you can't." "I can." The chairman cut him off. "And I have. You are done here." As Mu-shin was escorted out, his face a mask of fury and humiliation, Anita stood frozen in the center of the room, Jae-young's hand still wrapped around hers. She was waiting for the other shoe to drop, waiting for the moment he let go. It didn't come. 2 weeks later, Anita Adebayo stepped off a plane in Los Angeles. But this time she was not alone. Jae-young was beside her, his presence a steady anchor against the undertow of memories. She had told him she needed to do this alone. He had refused. "You faced my demons with me," he'd said. "Let me face yours with you." The warehouse was in a forgotten industrial district, a place of flickering fluorescent lights and the stale smell of neglect. Michael was still there, a night guard at a place that didn't deserve guarding. He was older now, heavier. The easy charm of his youth long faded into a permanent, sullen weariness. When he saw Anita step out of the black sedan, his face went slack with shock. He hadn't seen her in a decade, but he recognized her instantly. The guilt had kept her face fresh in his memory. "Anita," he breathed, his voice hoarse. Why are you here?" She walked toward him, her posture straight, her hands steady. There was no cleaning cart to hold on to now, just her own 2 feet on the cracked pavement. "I came to give you something," she said. Michael flinched, as if expecting a blow. "Look, about what happened back then, I was young and scared. I didn't mean for you to take the fall like that. I just panicked. You know how it is." Anita shook her head slowly. "No, Michael. I don't know how it is. I spent 10 years paying for your panic. I lost jobs, relationships, years of my life. I believed I was fundamentally untrustworthy because of what you did and what you let me carry." Her voice didn't shake. It was calm, clear, and final. "But I'm not here to punish you. I'm here to return what's yours." She stepped closer, close enough to see the fear in his eyes. "This shame, this guilt, this weight I've been carrying, it was never mine. It was yours. You gave it to me to hold because you were too weak to carry it yourself. And I took it because I didn't know I could say no." She reached up and placed her hand on her own chest, as if physically removing a burden. "I'm giving it back to you now. I'm not asking for an apology. I'm not asking for justice. I'm just telling you, I'm done being your punishment. I'm done." Michael's mouth opened and closed. No words came out. Tears began to stream down his weathered face. But Anita didn't wait for his response. She turned, walked back to the car where Jae-young waited, and slid into the passenger seat. For a long moment, she just sat there, breathing. The air felt different, lighter. "How do you feel?" Jae-young asked quietly. Anita looked at him, at this man who had seen her at her most exposed and chosen her anyway. "Free," she said. "I feel free." He took her hand, his thumb tracing a gentle circle on her palm. "No more codes," he said. She understood what he meant. No more walls. No more locks checked 7 times. No more apologizing for existing. No more living in the shadow of a single, exhausted mistake made by a 22-year-old girl who just wanted to help someone. She smiled, a real smile, the kind that reached her eyes and softened the permanent tension in her shoulders. "No more codes," she agreed. The car pulled away from the warehouse, leaving Michael alone in the flickering light, carrying the weight he had earned. Anita Adebayo did not look back. She was too busy looking forward, her hand resting in the hand of a man who saw her not as a cautionary tale, but as a story of resilience. The woman who had been chased out of a mansion, thrown onto the gravel with her scattered belongings, had finally, truly, walked back into her own life. And this time, no one could take it from her. And that is the story of Anita Adebayo, a woman who was broken, discarded, and told she was nothing, but who clawed her way back to a life of dignity, love, and hard-won peace. If her journey moved you, if you believe in second chances and the power of resilience, then please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. We bring you stories like this every week. Stories of triumph, love, and the unbreakable human spirit. Don't forget to comment below. What was your favorite moment in Anita's story? Was it her confrontation with Michael? Jae-young's speech at the gala? Or the quiet moment when he first said her name? Let me know. Your engagement helps these stories reach more people who need to hear them. Until next time, remember, no mistake is final, and it's never too late to write a new ending. See you in the next one.